I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yes, yes, yes. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. BPM is back in the building. I am Jared Ball, your host. Very happy to be back once again. Have a very, I think, important and exciting show coming up in a few minutes with Barrett Brown. But there is, and I've asked his uh, patience to give me just a few minutes to start with something else this morning that I'm going to get to in just a moment, because I just watched the big payback episode of Atlanta about reparations. And yeah, want to talk a little bit about that before we get moving. First of all, greetings to everybody who's live with us this morning, all the remixers. It's good to see you. Those who will see this later and hear this later on all your favorite podcast platforms, peace and welcome to you as well. Do all of the things, all of the violent metaphors to support the program and the channel. Smash, punish, destroy, all the violent metaphors, pounce the join button, all that good stuff. And then, of course, blackpowermedia.org and get you some of this merch. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing at least as well as could be expected. Definitely, if you haven't already, check out. I posted a lot of stuff over the weekend. Please check that out if you haven't already. To those who have, thank you very much. And to those of you who have shared some supportive, almost all the comments, particularly around the audio posted around my mother and father, have been positive. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Constructive criticism is always welcome. A couple people, you just got to remove a couple comments, block a couple people because they want to take the opportunities to go a little left. But because I am and we are a political family and can handle certain things, I don't mind sharing certain things about my life and my family and my family's history, especially because I do think it is interesting and politically relevant and of value. And those who want to make good meaning of it, it's there for you. Others who want to use it to take your shots, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. And it is very tempting. I did want to say this. It is very tempting to go into the whole thing of, you're doing it, anonymously and at, behind a digital screen and not to my face and all that kind of stuff. But in all honesty, at this point in my life, I prefer it that way. I got no armies and no soldiers and no crew. I don't want anybody rolling up on me, sharing their opinions to my face. I don't invite that anymore. I don't want any of that. So stay behind the screens, and then I can just delete the comments and we can move on. But anyway, for everybody else, mostly it's been really supportive. I appreciate it. So thank you all very much. Please continue to share and enjoy that work and all the other good stuff that I posted and that others are posting and have continue to contribute. The Warrior Class episode this weekend was great. Again, Sundays seemed like it was dope, but I had to miss it, so I have to go back and check it out. And I hope others will do the same, or you all enjoyed it while you were there. It's not that people take issues with the interviews, but I mean, you know what it is. I mean, and I get it. I have very Black radical and sometimes nationalist politics, and not everyone in those communities, understandably, to a certain extent, appreciates that coming from somebody born and raised by a Jew, and they wanted to share their comments. So I get that. And on some level, and this is something I would want to come back to, I think, in more depth, and that's sort of what I was kind of even wanting to say about the conversation we had with Omawale the other day. There's more that I would like to come back to, because I think in both of those instances, there's a lot that is misunderstood, and the nuance in my position and arguments is not accepted or appreciated either. Because people, I think it's much easier to fall into very narrow, constricted concepts of everything. So but that's really it. Um, but yeah. But it's all good, and some of it you can be expected. I mean, sometimes you share certain things, and in these public spaces, in these streets, and it is what it is. But anyway, but it's all good. I appreciate, and in all honesty, without some of the vitriol, some of the basis of the critique of my position and relationship to some of these politics and histories is, I think, legit and valid, and I'm here for it. But not just as a sounding board for people's, silliness. And then the other thing, lastly, on that is that I think there's too many people that are more interested in a personal "I got you" victory than actually winning. And I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, so yeah. Um, uh, yeah. Anyway, um, and yeah, you know what? But that conversation was for me, and I want to continue to have it. So we're not always all going to agree in these spaces and in these communities, but I think we can't avoid the conversation. We need to have them, and be willing to have them, and even disagree. So I'm going to come back to that. Um, uh, but Omar Wale seemed, we even had a follow up, a brief private exchange after the fact, and I think Omar Wale himself missed the point I'm making about there's a difference between what is said to be queer theory, and for me at least, and an acceptance. There's a difference between what is said to be queer theory and what is said to be, um, in which some to a certain extent I agree, a power structures liberalizing agenda, and on the other side for me, the acceptance of all members of the African community in the community. And that part for me isn't really negotiable, but that part is a little bit of a nuance that not everybody appreciates or can understand or wants to listen to. So it is what it is. Um, Fair enough. Yeah, no. In the exchange we had privately, I think he missed it. I think he missed it. I think a lot of people missed it, and some of the people that got at me afterwards, I think, missed it. They're not here for the nuance, and they're not outright rejecting it, because anyway. But anyway, so but I want to get to this thing real quick because before Barrett Brown gets here, um, and just share a couple of thoughts about this, because I did watch it, and I enjoyed it. So did you all see the big payback episode, the Atlanta episode, or the episode of it, the show Atlanta? Um, I want to Let me just share this part before I get to the specifics of my thought, just so if it gives some background here. In this one article I found, Justin Bartha breaks down Atlanta reparations episode. What would reparations actually look like? That's what this week's Atlanta episode titled The Big Payback attempted to depict, and Justin Bartha, who plays Marshall Johnson, a run-of-the-mill middle-aged white guy, is at the center of it. Bartha is known for his secondary roles in films like National Treasure, Geely, and The Hangover, but he really excels and leads this episode, and it is one of his best performances to date. The episode was written by Francesca Sloan and directed by Hiro Murai, and its unique exploration of what reparations. Actually, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that it's unique exploration of what reparations could mean for our society if it ever comes to fruition. The characters in episode 4 are learning about a black man winning a lawsuit against a Tesla executive whose relatives enslaved the man's ancestors. Similar to a recent racism lawsuit against the car company. The Big Payback is another reminder of the deep symbolism and historical references that have made Atlanta the show that it is, especially in season 3. While Ern, Darius, and the rest of the crew are learning what it's like to be black in Europe, Murai brings viewers back to America to show what the future could bring. All right, so that's all that I wanted to share from that article, just to give you some of the background. The basics if you didn't see the episode, and don't therefore know what it is I'm talking about. Let me change that background there we go. Uh, so I think that was all I had from there, right? Yeah. Yeah, because the rest of it just goes through. Oh, no, 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 I'm sorry, there was a little more. Okay, right, this was I'm sorry, right, 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 glad I checked. Um, uh, so the question here, thank you. The conversation about reparations has been ongoing for years, but I haven't seen it depicted on TV or in movies in this way. Do you think this represents what could be or what it might look like in the future? And do you think that's going to worry some people? This is where I was saying that I think the episode does not, sort of break new ground with the discussion of reparations. You haven't really seen it before. That's what makes the episode so exciting for me. It opens a conversation and it's up for the interpretation, and hopefully people will talk about it. I don't know if I'm really in the place to speak on it, but obviously the conversation has been taken in the modern age fairly seriously since Ta-Nehisi Coates' Atlantic article. I remember reading that when it came out, and then I revisited it. I know that there are people like Cory Booker who are trying to push ahead the conversation within our political system. It is something that has always seemed like an impossible thing. It's hard to read that Ta-Nehisi Coates article without really having a serious conversation about reparations. If Atlanta and the brilliant people who work on the show and put the show together can bring that conversation to more people, it's worth a worthwhile venture. All right, so that's why that was I'm glad I remembered to check for that note, because that was really where I wanted to sort of, I guess, dig in my own response to the episode. Um First of all, that the episode starts as the first note I have here is that when the episode starts, you see that the white dude that they're talking about is in line at some coffee shop listening to his earbuds, listening to NPR, which I thought was perfect. Just with my own views of NPR, the equivalent here to what Frantz Fanon said of Radio Alger in Algiers during French colonial control of Algeria. Creating for the white affluent liberal a sort of sense of place and a justification for their colonial rule. So that was a perfect, I thought, opening for the episode. But my next note here is that ultimately this episode is an anti-reparations propaganda piece, as it narrows the discussion to the most narrow definition of reparations and prevents more radical concepts of an improved world. So this is almost always maybe my only issue with reparations as is popularly discussed in this country, where for the most part the emphasis, even in lampooning it, whether it's on Chappelle's show or elsewhere, is an emphasis on and a reduction of the issue to direct payments to Black people. Now, the episode doesn't get into how are Black people defined. It doesn't get into the soda versus the reverse hashtag argument. It doesn't get into Tariq Nasheed's FBA stuff. By the way, if you are a member of the channel, please go check out the Saturday Night Live version of Members Only that we did this weekend. Members Only of Not By Myself, where we looked at some of Tariq's. And for all that he gets wrong everywhere else, as I pointed out in that episode, Tariq Nasheed's understanding of hip hop history is among the most atrocious of his incorrect analyses that I think I was surprised by how bad. I don't agree with almost anything else he says. So I guess I shouldn't on some level be surprised, but I was surprised at how bad his understanding of hip hop history is. I mean, it's really, really bad. Um, like first day elementary school bad. I was like, wow. Anyway, but they don't get into that. They don't raise any of that in this episode of and who's determining who's, so the only thing that is done in the episode is that apparently the government has made it possible for people to do research into their backgrounds, and if individual Black people can find individual white people to whom their ancestors were owned by the white ancestors, they can appeal or demand of those whites some form of payment, and it can be I apparently with government involvement and support extracted from these white folks, including from garnishing their paychecks. So it reduces again the issue to individual checks, uh, and then leaves it in this episode, much like I think the discussion is meant to be had popularly. It leaves the issue of, again, individual checks, and the individuals themselves have to go about the research and the collection and the confronting, um, uh, of those individual whites. So it doesn't really, the episode doesn't really get into, again, who is determined to be qualified for reparations, in terms of, how much the reparations payments, like what formula, and then uh, how you're going to exactly go about getting them without creating a hostile, uh, personalized exchange. And then, of course, the episode ends with, oh, by the way, couple spoilers. So I guess I should, if you need to skip this, come back in about 10 minutes when Barrett's here, or five, and when we start with Barrett. But it leaves everything to this, again, this very individual, and that's sort of the point I'm thinking why I call it anti-reparations propaganda, because anyone watching this, uh, uh, particularly whites, but I would think anybody else who watches this, the idea that on some level it could be fun, yeah, to track down the whites that owe you some money and then chase them down, and then, like the sister is shown in a very, I think, stereotypical, lampoonish way of, being the hood sister named Shaniqua, who just is the stereotype, chasing down the white man and, demanding her money. And then the episode ends with where you see all the whites doing all of the service work, and black people sitting comfortably in a nice restaurant. As I note here, though, but again, so this is what I'm saying. Why I'm saying it's anti-reparations propaganda, because again, even when you see the white collapse, and suicide rates, in the show, which some might find kind of, I mean, a little bit humorous, etc. And then the brother says to the white dude, that watches the white dude kill himself, that there's going to be more of that, and so on and so on. It's again suggesting this massive wealth transfer that is destroying the lives of whites to the point where they would kill themselves, and creating a material condition for black people, again, that suggests a reversal of roles. So, it's included in what I've already said is not dealt with in the episode. What is also not dealt with in the episode is, what was the political movement? What was the political process that led to this being adopted and accepted? What would have had to have occurred for this to happen? What would have to occur for a society such as this one to accept even the level of white suicide rates, in favor of a wealth transfer over to descendants of enslaved Africans? What would have had to occur here? And that's where, and because, for instance, this is what I'm saying: white people, if to the point where they're being pushed to suicide, they're not going to simply kill themselves and give up all their money without a political, if not other, form of conflict. So I would have liked to, and when it's just left out there like this, white people, of course, are going to see this and become defensive and more recalcitrant and less likely to engage a political process, which reparations advocates must recognize as necessary for the political process to accept that transfer of wealth. But it also doesn't address the political power in all of this either. It does. So are we then to assume that whites have given up control over the political apparatus, have given up control over the dominant sectors of the economy and control over the economy? Have they because that's somewhat suggested in the episode, but is not engaged. So again, to my concern, black people get a check, and as is discussed, at least in part in the episode, whites feel like we've assuaged our guilt and can move on, and society can sort of march on as it is just now, with black people benefiting from the capitalist imperialist exploitation of the planet and other working people. And then, of course, it showed some Black people still doing their service work and more menial labor. So what does that mean? That these are non FBA reverse hashtag folks? Or does this mean that they couldn't find the proof necessary to collect their reparations, or the whites that they tracked down whose ancestors owned their ancestors were not sufficiently wealthy to transfer any meaningful? I mean, none of this is really, so the episode just sort of assures, I think, a permanent and increased hostility. Then they do a lot of other little things that I have a problem with that we can come back to in another time, like how are whites determining who is white? And the one Ashkenazi Jew in the show says, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew and I'm proud of it. Therefore, and since we were enslaved, that's proof that I didn't own any slaves and couldn't be, called in by someone Black in today's United States to extract wealth from me, or a transfer of wealth from me. Again, I don't always agree with the emphasis of some sectors of the Black community who put on Jews, but to suggest that Ashkenazi or other Jews were not involved or at some point benefiting business-wise or through direct investment or ownership of enslaved Africans, that's not historical. Same thing with the white woman who said her people were from Peru. So are we saying but again, if your people's ancestors enslaved people outside of the United States, then perhaps that's what, I don't know. So that wasn't really dealt with, I thought, properly, or is, well, anyway. So all of that said, this is why I keep saying that we should want more, and that reparations should be institutional. It should be something it should be a part of our assuming political power and really being focused on changing the society, not just benefiting differently from an ignoble and hostile empire that is exploiting and extracting from us from within, our diaspora abroad, and creating the kind of inequality that I don't think we should just be thinking to sit on top of. Anyway, so it's just not big enough. And again, I think that it's just going to reduce the discussion in pop culture to where it really is. And white people are going to be encouraged to fall back into their recalcitrant position of, I don't want to give up my money. Why would I support anything like that? And it encourages, I think, Black people to organize specifically around that issue as opposed to something larger and more radical. That's what, so. All right, those are my 2 cents on that. I'm happy to come back to that. Let's take a quick transition, and please put your comments in there. I'll happily come back to it later on in the show. But let's take a quick break and come back and get into surveillance and infiltration and issues related to that with Barrett Brown, right here on I Mix What I Like. Back in a second. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, I'm just seeing his private comments here. No, Barrett Brown is here right on time. Of course, you know what it is: former political prisoner, hacktivist, as some I've seen it called, and someone highly engaged and involved in issues related to surveillance, the state, and somebody we want to continue to talk to. So here he is back again, Barrett Brown. I forgot to mention journalist. And author as well in your bio. What's up, Ben? No, this is the right time. It's the perfect time to talk to a white guy from the United States originally, right after talking about reparations.
I popped in the backstage right when you began the sentence. Yeah, I know it might be fun to track down some of these white guys through reparations, and I'm thinking like, fuck, mine is Barrett like Pastor Brown. My grandpa.
No,
I just showed up into the trap.
No. But my point would be
no.
Yes, not to put it in a situation where people should be, because I think that's the whole point. It shouldn't be Black people looking for descendants of looking to you, particularly individually. Anyway, anyway,
you found one.
You should check out the episode of Atlanta, and then we, and let me know what you think. But anyway. So Barrett, let me start with this. I actually had a couple things written here. I wanted to actually just start with, before we get into anything specific, and then I kind of did get caught in the rabbit hole of your memoir. be more widely read. But I did want to just start with this basic, overall, vague, broad question. If you would describe, as you see it, the current state of surveillance, pun intended, that is, where are we today? In light of something that I did read in your memoir that you were kind enough to share an unpublished version of, where you write, quote, National Security Agency Director Michael Hayden gave a speech proclaiming that Anonymous, the group that I'm happy to have you talk more about, would soon be capable of taking control of the nation's power plants. He was talking nonsense, of course, as intelligence professionals tend to do when budgets are at stake. By the time Hayden made that claim, Anonymous's power was already on the wane, and indeed some small but influential portion of it had recently come under partial control of the FBI, though that wouldn't be revealed until later, end quote. So when I read that, I thought to start with that question: what is the current state of surveillance, again, pun intended, and where are we today?
So we've long passed the point at which surveillance itself is a great threat. I mean, surveillance is like, I don't want to say superstructure. So surveillance is a mechanism by which the things that come after surveillance by which those things are made possible. The things that, and the problem with the surveillance debate, especially after Snowden, was, it was framed as follows: like, oh, I'm not hiding anything, blah blah. Even Obama, went on some comedy show and pointed out to the host, oh, no one, the NSA doesn't care about your text messages. Surveillance is what I do. Surveillance is what you do. Surveillance is what any journalist does. It's what citizens do, and the government does it much better than everybody else. The real problem is disinformation. Surveillance. I mean, in individual cases, it comes down to, like, if you're being you are at absolute risk from surveillance to the extent that you are, someone who's about to be assassinated because your phone has NSO on it, and you're an advocate for Bahraini women, you're an advocate for Saudi Arabian women, and they're trying to hunt you down. For the majority of people in the West, surveillance is not an issue to them, and arguably shouldn't be. What the issue is that the products of those surveillance can be used against the entirety of the public, regardless of what they've done wrong, because the purpose is to be in a position vis-a-vis the government. The state wants to be in a position whereby it can know what kind of disinformation it needs to put out. It uses the surveillance to know who has to be gone after, and to know everything about them, and try to find useful facts about their fears and their triggers and so forth. And surveillance on a much more esoteric scale, like I just said. I mean, there's technologies that have been around, they're just very little understood, created by DARPA, IARPA, assets like that take all this surveillance after Palantir is done with it, after they've taken the information and used these increasingly powerful algorithms to model societies, to model even individual behavior and predict individual behavior. One of the things Palantir, one of the softwares they came out with years ago for companies and government agencies, as well as to model, group behavior on a large scale. That's when we start getting the issue. And so the state of the surveillance is something as such that we lost interest in, me and my people I researched with, pretty early on, because we very quickly came across the end product of the surveillance, the reason for the surveillance, the real weaponization of information that is possible without surveillance, but it is aided tremendously via widespread surveillance, disinformation on a mass scale, the kind that makes informed consent impossible.
Right on. Okay. Very good. I appreciate that. Look, I have more that I would want to ask you in light of reading some of your memoirs, but I know that wasn't the specific purpose for you joining us this morning. So I just given that
was actually a great question, and I wanted I forgot to answer the other half of it. Let me try to do so real briefly, because that was a long ramble.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Because that portion of the FBI or the NSA coming out and depicting a temporal enemy, Anonymous, as, oh, here's the next big threat. This is part of the dynamic that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Russia versus U.S. We're dealing with it. in a lot of the battles that are ongoing and very important. The NSA, I mean, the fact that the NSA wanted to position Anonymous as more powerful than it was obviously speaks to a very old strategy among the Western states, among states in general in the last 150 years. You grow more worthwhile, more useful. You grow more credible in a perceived way to your constituency to the extent that your enemy is powerful and engaging in wrongdoing. As such, that the U.S. strategy vis-a-vis Anonymous is somewhat similar to the U.S. strategy vis-a-vis Russia and vice versa. And I bring that up because Russia and U.S. are both going to come up in the rest of this stuff we're talking about today.
All right, right on. Forget that little technical difficulty, everybody. I had didn't realize I had unplugged my Ethernet cord by accident. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, very good. I appreciate that. But as I was saying, I know the specifics of your memoir weren't the purpose for this conversation. I just got caught up in some aspects of it. So I did want you, having given that overview, let's start with what actually brings you here today. This issue of infiltration, and surveillance, but and start there, and then maybe we can work back and I can raise or work in a few of these questions that I have from the memoir. So do you want to lay that out and start in any particular point?
Yeah.
And if so, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this brings together a lot of things that you and I have talked about since I first started coming on a little over a year ago, involving, Anonymous, WikiLeaks, The Intercept, the CIA, Russian intelligence, the private intelligence actors that kind of assemble over these that are engaged kind of behind the scenes in all these situations, some of which we'll be talking about today, some of the individual actors. What I've been arguing for the last couple of years, as it's become more clear, is that any movements, especially this one, the transparency activist movement, has to be primarily concerned with keeping itself clean. Has to be primarily concerned with avoiding the same mistakes that have befallen and kind of collapsed every worthwhile movement. I mean, most worthwhile movements in recent historical memory. We can't allow ourselves to be on the defensive because we're being attacked by some outside force, whether it be the U.S., the CIA, or if it's Russia, or if it's Palantir. We can't allow that defensiveness to become a method by which infiltrators can defend themselves from scrutiny. But that's exactly what's happened over and over again with elements of this movement. And so I've come on, I've talked about Glenn Greenwald. I've come on, I've talked about Assange. I've talked about some of the people that I worked with more closely, even until recently. And in each of these cases, with Assange being actually the far lesser wrongdoer, now that we know more about what's happened, in each of these cases, the fact that we were under unjustified attacks, like myself, other whistleblowers, people who are in our service, that has allowed each of us to either engage in bad behavior that's still meant well within the framework of the movement, and B, also ensured that those who do not mean well, never meant well, or who infiltrated the movement to begin with, or who were turned, paid off, scared, threatened with prison, it ensured that they, and still ensures today, that they are very hard to dislodge, and thus the movement becomes not just riddled with difficulty, riddled with barriers, overworked, unable to focus, unable to accomplish much. It becomes an actual tool for our enemies. That's all very abstract, and so I guess the best way to explain from that point, just briefly, is there are a number of people that have we now have proof, as of sometimes just in the last few months, we've had the smoking gun proof, that are being used by the intelligence community of the U.S. and UK and other allies and who essentially run Anonymous now, who essentially run the portions of Anonymous that we're all seeing mentioned by Hillary Clinton on MSNBC a few months ago when she, urged Anonymous to continue doing these hacks against Russia. They are in charge of the major accounts that essentially the media watches to determine what is Anonymous, what is it doing, what is Anonymous' stance. The Uranon News account, which has like 7 million followers, is followed by by huge numbers of influential people. That is also part of this. It's also run effectively now. I mean, as of the last couple of years, we don't know exactly when this started, by the U.S. intelligence community, and that's not even that interesting, because Anonymous and so forth has been run by the U.S. intelligence community in the past, and the FBI, as you mentioned, or as you mentioned in the excerpt of my memoirs. That was something that came out. The FBI bragged about it. That's the only reason we know it for sure. So it's not that interesting that Anonymous and so forth, these individuals, that its apparatus has been taken over by the intelligence community. That's mundane. What's interesting and frightening is how difficult it's been for someone like myself and some of those I work with, who have been known whistleblowers, praised to the skies by every institution involved for the years. National Magazine Awards, heroic whistleblower, prisoner, guy. None of that stuff seems to matter anymore because of the informational ecosystem we live in, and especially the informational ecosystem as applies to the white left, which is a specific thing we'll get into today, because it helps to drill down on this broader issue. We'll talk about the white left, its preoccupations, and why the black left needs to be very, very aware of it. Not just in terms of here's what white people can do or here's what they'll ignore, but here's what's happening right now, and here's how egregious it's gotten just in the past few years. So that's what I will try to drill down on in a focused way, despite myself, as we proceed with the interview.
No. So well, let's try to do that. I mean, I've mentioned it with you and routinely before that that there is even from my perspective, a kind of narrow and conservative approach among the white left to even their support of Julian Assange, primarily and previously Chelsea Manning, primarily that they never connect those two cases of political imprisonment to longer histories of political imprisonment coming out of course, the counterintelligence program, which you do mention in your memoir, and something I wanted to come back to. But so extending just from that point, what are these issues that you're seeing in terms of the white left and its shortcomings, or is there a relationship between what I'm complaining about, that is this almost exclusive focus on Assange and no other political prisoners, and the concerns you have in terms of the white left?
Yep. I would say that the nature and the degree of focus on one over another, particularly on Assange, I think that comes out of a different problem for the most part than the other ones I'm more worried about. It's something I wrote about in an essay that was published a few months ago in Germany. We had a conference, me and Reality Winner and John Kariakou and a few others, and we all kind of said the same things about this. Yeah, it's unfortunate the way in which personalities, whether it be Assange's or anyone else's, including mine, those appeal to people somewhat more than the issues involved. Those appeal to journalists. They're easier to write about. We're all colorful characters, almost by definition. And that's both good and bad. It can be used both strategically, by us, but it's a very double-edged sword. And it invariably, looking back, I think it has taken away from the things that we're presenting in the first place. And definitely it's also by some other function perhaps has definitely not been really well integrated into the knowledge of the public or even specialists who should know these things. Yeah, into the history that began before Assange, before Snowden, before me, of COINTELPRO and all that stuff. So the issue, the major issue here, before I get into the particular white left preoccupation issue that we've run into recently, major issue is that we can be weaponized. Those of us who become, whether it be Assange or whether it become even individuals who never went to prison or never been prosecuted, but have come into the transparency activist space, either as lawyers, defense lawyers, or as legal defense assistants, or who otherwise had no direct involvement in this, but came in and slowly insinuated themselves into the movements, into the actual organizations that exist, into the boardrooms of the groups that help whistleblowers. That's kind of where a lot of the problem lays, because somehow they have become, they have replaced us. And by us, I mean, quite frankly, those of us who I think used to have an established, accepted record of being worth listening to on some of these issues. They have replaced us in the public sphere. And that would be less of a problem if they were truly representative of us, and much less of a problem if some of them had not been caught since then being involved in ongoing operations in coordination with neo-Nazi Andrew Arnheimer, who we talked about last couple episodes, or Peter Thiel, who just had an actual rally last week, which we'll go into in a second, or with the CIA, and that, unfortunately, that is the case. And we've gone over some of this in previous episodes on individuals. My concern is that we can, I've spent about a year rolling up some of these people, whether it be Aubrey Cottle, Kurtaner, the founder of Anonymous, who I think now is no longer no one is any longer claiming he's not CSIS FBI. That's because we put a lot of work into it. We rolled up Neil Rauhauser, FBI cooperator, who's also involved in these groups, helping to run Anonymous now. FBI cooperated against me and other Anons 10 years ago. We have all of his correspondence with his old handler, Daniel Borsik. It's been public for a while. Took us a while to roll him up as well. Took him a while for us to get it to the point where those who are not yet seen widely as obvious intelligence operators, they can no longer associate openly with those people or with Weave. They have to hide it now. It's been more work than it should have been. And that means the public has been less informed than it should have been on who to trust and who's really running the organizations that are being presented to them as, the revolutionary youth. Can
I just so I'm clear here? So one, I wanted to ask, so if anyone wanted to follow up on what you're saying are now the publicly available information that you and your comrades have been compiling, is this where they would, is Project PM where they would go to see that, or is it just out there that, or is there one place they can go to find, read up on all of this, or
Stop Active? If people Google Stop Activist Surveillance, it's a blog run by anti-fascist researcher Karma, who is one of the few I've been dealing with on this for about a year. That's now the best place. The Barrett B Twitter account on which vast majority has been compiled was suspended a few days ago. It's gone forever. So, it's not that it mattered that much anyway. I think,
But you said stop the blog, stop
Activist Surveillance.
Stop Activist Surveillance.
Right? There's an anti-fascist researcher called Karma on Twitter, we followed. Yeah, my Project PM Twitter as well has some of it. I'll continue to put stuff up while that account lasts. It probably won't last very long for some of the reasons that we're talking about today. I guess my point is that the other side is winning. It's protecting itself very, very well, and it will continue to do so. And that's going to be the least of it. Karma 161, all spelled out, is the other guy to follow. He runs on Twitter. Karma 161, all spelled out in words. He runs Stop Activist Surveillance, which has articles on this Aubrey Cottle, Kurtaner, Elizabeth Shaw, the accelerationist, the other people that have all been working with this influence network run by Peter Thiel, and most publicly facing via Distributed Denial of Secrets, a group I used to work with, which is now, as of the last couple of weeks, documented, run by people who have lied about their role in the intelligence community and who also run the anonymous accounts.
And this is why, again, that as you've talked about previously and elsewhere, Anonymous that had emerged at one point did have, for lack of a better way of describing it, a left-wing element that you're saying has been sort of pushed out and forced elsewhere. Anonymous has been largely infiltrated and taken, run by the U.S. state apparatus. And this is one reason why when I used to tweet at them and ask them to politely hack into the student loan debt database, that never happened? Is that maybe one
Well,
reason
no,
why
not necessarily.
my
That's
dead is
something
still there?
that was a common request back in the day. I get a lot of these requests, both including when I was in prison, by prison guards who wanted to know about aliens and stuff.
Oh wow,
Anyway,
okay, all
but
right.
no, that's not necessarily the reason. A lot of back even in the good old days when the FBI, infiltration was very limited, and we tended to catch them very quickly, like Aaron Barr, who ran the U.S. Air Force intelligence guy who ran HB Gary. That happened right when I joined Anonymous, like a month afterwards. Even in the good old days when we had hackers that were, the hacks tend to be opportunistic in a technical sense, as in, I don't know a lot about how this works because I hate computers and shit. I think they're all a huge mistake. But, basically there will be vulnerabilities in certain sites. Most often what happens was people who, all things, at the best are legitimately, trying to get anonymous help to do its work. They will pass on these vulnerabilities. Then they would go up to a couple of the hackers, it would be Jeremy Hammond or Sabu Hector Monsegur, who wasn't turned until about June 2011. And then the hacks would either occur, based on, is this something that we collectively think should happen? Are we willing to ratchet up the stakes, for this? But ultimately, is it possible? And the student loan thing, I don't think, my understanding is would not have been as easy as people think it was. Since then,
I
I
don't know
think
anything
things
about
like
it.
robot have come out, but anyway, so
It was
yeah,
just a joke that I used to have.
But it's a good question because unfortunately it's one of the arguments or one of the debates that occurs publicly and privately about its infiltration is about motivations, like why are they doing this and why are they doing that. The fact that the Anonymous is going after Russia, it's been presented by the adversary. I'll just start calling them that, the Teal influence network. It's been presented by people who run DDoS, these ex-CIA people and all that, as our arguments. Now, of course, as you know full well, we've been making this argument about them for a year, well before Ukraine started, and so it is not the basis of our argument, but it's something that the adversary wants to present and has and will continue to present as our sole or central arguments for them being Western intelligence community, because of course our actual arguments are so solid that my Twitter accounts need to be suspended, to make them harder to access. Just to give you one example, our actual arguments are based on court legal documents and so forth. But yeah, so people who want to follow specifics of this, number one, good luck. Number two, I would say don't bother at this point. I would say just wait. We're working on some things. But if you do want to, follow Karma 161.
Well, it's just I'm sorry. Finish that.
Oh no, just saying follow. There's a couple of things you can follow, and there's stuff that's archived, and it's just, but a lot of it's now gone. A lot of it's missing because of Twitter, because they've removed my.
No, I just wanted to ask because because one of the points I have here even to ask you is that even just since you come on here a couple times, you attract a good amount of what I consider to be spam emails of people telling us, all these things about what Barrett is and isn't and shouldn't be involved and why are I just wanted to ask you to share publicly with those who might be a little critical of what you're saying, where how is he saying this? He's making these claims. Where can we look this up?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah. And regarding that's that kind of thing that you're getting, a lot of people around me having there's been an uptick of it in the last couple of weeks, even in the last like 4 or 5 days. And it's stuff that in some cases was tried a couple of years ago and didn't work. Now they're kind of remixing it and trying different things. Some of it being presented publicly. Most of it involves like fake rape allegations that were looked into by The Intercept a couple of years ago at the height of Me Too, and were found like in many cases we know who's sending these messages. It's Cassandra Ford, who people can Google. It's a BuzzFeed article about her work with the Mueller Commission. She works closely with some of these people like Weave and the Aubrey Cottle, the neo-Nazis, and the people who were harassing Kevin Gallagher, my former legal defense head, before he disappeared and died. They're being sent by people like Aubrey Cottle himself, who according to the Atlantic magazine, as of a year and a half ago, was the founder of Anonymous. Something that's been refuted by even their own expert sources on that, publicly and privately refuted. They're being sent by people who, this is what I'm getting at, is it's so clear to those who do have enough time to follow a little bit of it, or who see some of it, that it's more of that the bigger issue here is not so much even that, that they're going after real activists, real whistleblowers, or that they've taken this over for the CIA. The real issue is how broken the information sphere is, how broken the modern West is. These are things that were very simple 8 years ago. It was very simple for people to say, well, this guy, we know who he is. His name is out there. He's very public about everything he does. He's been under scrutiny. Let's listen to him. He's also won awards for getting into this. And on the other end, here's a couple of anonymous Twitter accounts like claiming these things. We don't know who they are. Which do we follow? That's literally what's going on in people's heads these days. And it's why it's one of Karl Rove's great tricks back in the early aughts, when John Kerry, he went to Vietnam and whatever. Oops, Bush, can't really compete on that one. Went AWOL for the National Guard. Well, let's bring out the Swift boat stuff. Now it's a wash, as Bill Maher in one of his few useful interviews once described it when he went on debated Bill O'Reilly. It's a wash, and that's what's been happening. And it was effective when the Republicans did it. And it's not that hard to explain or understand. It's a very easy informational trick. Now extrapolate, and so look how well it's worked. In so much as that I've been kicked out of the white community and have to come on here to say my thing these days. As if I don't know enough troubles already. No, I'm kidding. There's a few white outlets that do keep having me on, but and then extrapolate.
Now you gotta slum it with the black folks, Barrett.
Exactly. Again, it's not good for you. It's not good for me. We're all going to get in more trouble. And plus with the reparations thing, I'm going to be right here and easy to find. Imagine what defies easy summary. Imagine what kind of tricks, what kind of intelligence operations, what kind of methodologies, technologies that exist of the sort that we used to expose, like persona management, mass, disinformation, social media bots. Imagine what we don't know about. Or imagine the things that I can't really do a good job presenting or explaining in ways that matter. Imagine how much more sophisticated the adversary is. DARPA, IARPA, the not monolithic, but the climatistic kind of white wasp aristocracy, now joined by these billionaire, technocrats like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Pierre Omidyar, who funded The Intercept, who I accidentally worked for from prison, not realizing. Just imagine how bad it is. And so from there, I guess.
Wait a minute, Barrett. So you got your Barrett Brown account got kicked off of Twitter. Didn't this happen right after Musk stepped up on his Twitter ownership and ended up on the board?
It happened in the morning. It happened about a couple hours after Peter Thiel's speech to the revolutionary youth. As Eric, remember we talked about Eric Weinstein, head of Thiel Capital. He tweeted out about. So there's this big picture of Peter Thiel addressing crypto coin people who are in cryptocurrency, which I have no opinion about. Nothing wrong with that. It's not my thing. But a lot of people who are libertarians and who are actually quite vulnerable to being easily tricked because they are white libertarians and not that intelligent. I don't know why I'm air quotes. Peter Thiel's constituency. Peter Thiel is one of his natural constituencies. People who are kind of smart, kind of know some things, and have rejected the left because of the few dumb things the left has done, but have no idea what the right's up to. Like those kind of people we could have had back in the day. Anyway, same people who took over Anonymous while I was in prison, by the way. So he's giving a speech to them, and Eric Weinstein. Am I getting his name wrong? Anyway, Eric, head of Thiel Capital, tweets out. This is one of Thiel's people. Peter Thiel gave a speech to the about the revolutionary youth and how they should use cryptocurrency to return fire against the gerontocracy. Now, seeing Eric Weinstein use the term the revolutionary youth in reference to Peter Thiel's people was more than I could take on a morning. I could take a lot, but that was too much. So I replied, Eric, I will rip your heart out, your beating heart out, and eat it. And 2 seconds later, I got, that was it. It was a violent threat. Now, I wasn't actually going to do that. I wasn't actually going to go Temple of Doom style, rip out his heart, and while it beats and then eat it. I was exaggerating for comic effect. I used to be a humorist. But having said that, I would do that if I had the opportunity, so it's a fair ban. Anyway, so bottom line is that's what I got banned, and that's kind of what's happening. Peter Thiel is presenting himself successfully.
It is Eric
as
Weinstein,
the answer.
by the
There
way.
it is. Oh, I can't even look at it. Oh. I mean, the Peter Youth, you know, you're able to show people
A
that
revolutionary youth movement for good reason. It is thus the time for revolutionary youth should understand their enemies and return fire. This is at the Bitcoin Miami conference. Again, this is
the
just
guy
a
who
quick
got trumpet
aside
off.
from
The guy,
my
German.
pettiness.
This is a German citizen. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say, for my pettiness, this is why I keep saying this is evidence of another piece of evidence as to why all this stuff about Bitcoin liberating people is propaganda and fantasy. But
it's one
psychological
of
warfare is
several
not really
things that Peter
fantasy.
Thiel has a huge amount of already constituencies within, because he has 7 different constituencies, some of whom don't know their constituencies. Like the perhaps left libertarians who watch Joe Rogan don't know who Eric Weinstein is, and they know he's like a head of a capital investment firm. Hadn't occurred to them. Kind of weird to have that guy like that on Joe Rogan, but other leftists who are listening to some of the fake Antifa accounts that are being run by Neil Rauhauser, who was an FBI cooperator. Blah, blah. It just so there's a bunch of constituencies. That crypto coin is one of them. I don't mean to insult the crypto community. It's not my thing. I don't know anything about currency. I don't care. Maybe I'm sure it's useful. Whatever. I never.
No, it's not. You should insult it more. You should learn more. Look at it even 5 minutes more than you have.
My life's complicated enough without knowing more terrible things. So I'll let you guys handle the cryptocurrency. But anyway, so that's what's going. So that's what's happening. Yeah.
By the way, that reminds me of something, and I have another. And folks, I am sort of going through some of the comments in the chat for and highlighting a few. So if you a couple questions for Barrett, and so if you want to, please make sure if you have a comment or question, either restate it now, or let me, and or I'll go back and find it if I can. But to your point, and I just rewatched for one of my classes the documentary Wormwood, where this quote was said again, and I really appreciated. The more you understand, the less you can draw a conclusion. And I really appreciated that point. Anyway, so yeah. One question that I'll go back. There was one question that I found. I'll come back and ask it now. Let me pull it up here. Has Barrett explained what he means by left? Generally, I think we should reserve the term for people on the correct side of class struggle. So when you're saying the white left, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I'm using it in the sense that Socrates used justice. I don't mean. I know full well I can't define it. I don't mean to define it. I'll leave others to define it. I'm a quietist. Infinite time, I would use longer terms. I'm just using the left as opposed to the right. I don't know who's on the right side of the class struggle. I know very little about it. I don't come from the working class. I come from the upscale criminal class of Dallas. So these are not my issues. My issues are, different. My fiance here was English. I'm living in London now, unfortunately. They know all about that stuff. The guy whose place we're staying in has his Fidel Castro flag over here. That's all not my issue. I don't pretend to be working class. So if the class war was the only thing going on, then I would be the enemy, I suppose, even though I don't have any money, because I'd be identified as not working class because I try not to work.
Just commit class suicide.
Yeah.
It seems like you have anyway. Castro did. He's a perfect example of that. So right on.
And Che Guevara to some extent. Lenin.
Che did too. So right on.
There's a long history of
But I do like that upper. What did you say? The upper. What is it? The upper class, upper criminal
the
class.
Upscale criminal class. My dad came from a small town and made his money illegally. And he did the same thing. Took me on adventures in East Africa to try to go do some more neo-imperialism over there. That's why I know some Swahili. It's not because I joined the Black Guerrilla family in prison. It's because I understand. I understand that's what makes me so useful. I know these people.
I haven't got to that part of your memoir yet. I can't. That should be.
Didn't make it in. I'm not interesting of a person. Just doesn't make There's an article about it. If you look up Barrett Brown East Africa, there's an article I wrote after I got out of prison about it.
Okay.
About the Tanzania, but it's funny.
Well, one thing that you did write in the memoir that I think is perfectly appropriate, and I'm happy to come back to anything you just. But Yeah, I will have to go read that. You said, quote, there was one story I was intent on doing myself. Romus/Coin, well, spelled
Yep.
coin, obviously, was among the operational monikers that would that one would come across. That is Romus/Coin. Is one of the monikers that one would come across in perusing the H.B. Gary emails, usually in mysterious and unhelpful contexts. This one stood out as primarily intriguing because it was mentioned as having something to do with Apple. Forbes tech blogger Sean Lawson had openly wondered about this in February, but lost interest after an anonymous commenter chimed in to the effect that there was nothing of interest here since COIN stood for counterinsurgency. The acronym just been rolled out with astute marketing flair by the Pentagon, which had largely replaced a jumble of old urban warfare techniques and presented it as game-changing new strategy in the war they'd been losing. And since anything having to do with counterinsurgency is necessarily benevolent, as Vietnam showed us, and also taking into account that there was certainly nothing suspicious about the idea of Apple being involved in tactical warfare, the press naturally declined to pursue the story. In fact, COIN can also stand in for counterintelligence, as in the FBI's illegal counterintelligence program, end quote.
And indeed, in the Romas coin documents, in one of them, it is referred to as counterintelligence, not counterinsurgency. But to find that, you have to dig deep past the anonymous commenter. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm so obsessed with reporters I used to deal with, who I found out stuff about, because until the press is cleaned out, purged, take that however you want it, nothing, no struggle whatsoever, class, environments, anything, is going to work all that well. I'm living proof of that.
Well,
that
just opened up a whole other
program.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I should note that program. It was used by the U.S. So this was a bunch of firms that had already been investigating.
You're talking about Romus Coin now, right?
Romus Coin, yeah. So this is a program that existed. It had been named Romas by Aaron Barr, my old adversary, before Peter Thiel replaced him, head of H.B. Gary, when he worked for Northrop Grumman. It was an ongoing project run by an unspecified client in the U.S. U.S. intelligence / that's it, Roman. Yeah. So some client, whether it be the Pentagon, whatever, the client is never mentioned. But what are shown in the emails is Apple and Google's both national security executives meeting with Aaron Barr, the guys at Palantir, the ones who we were about to catch in this massive scandal that Congress started to investigate and then dropped. The scandal going after journalists, going after Glenn Greenwald, saying, Glenn Greenwald, he could be pushed to choose quote career over cause, unquote, something that I used to think could never happen. Now we know more. This was a terrible thing that we had caught them doing, and with Team Themis, this Romas coin thing was more important and got almost.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, Barrett. Please forgive me. I'm very sorry. Are you saying that the documents were saying that the government was saying that Glenn Greenwald was somebody who
no. That was it was the contractors, Palantir and HB Gary. The thing we caught them doing for the government, the DOJ was involved. Eric Holder, helped put this together. They were going after WikiLeaks as well as after labor unions, anti-Chamber of Commerce groups. This was a Team Themis scandal. It's referred to. It's in the book there, and that's what we found in February 2011 when the HB Gary hack occurred. It made the press for a month. Palantir and HB Gary and In-Game Systems and Barrett were the four firms involved. They were all brought together by a major DC lobbying firm called Hunt and Williams in DC, which the DOJ had brought on, in these emails that we obtained, had brought on to help Bank of America and U.S. Chamber of Commerce, both of which had come to the DOJ and said, Bank of America was like, hey, we're worried about WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks claims it has documents on a bank that's been committing crimes. And of course, Bank of America, they're like, oh, we're a bank, we commit crimes, maybe that's us. Came to the DOJ, asked for help. DOJ is like, of course, we're a concierge service for powerful criminal interests, hope and change. U.S. Chamber of Commerce, same thing. We have these groups, Code Pink, Stop the Chamber, labor unions. We want help against them. DOJ is like, sure, I'm Eric Holder. Why wouldn't we help you? That's one of the reasons that Congress started to investigate. It's one of the things that even the New York Times and so forth reported on those aspects. But that Romos coin, so that was a big, terrible thing, Team Themis. It was a big thing that I'm mostly associated with. I'm sometimes incorrectly given credit for discovering aspects of it. I discovered some of it after the first few days, but it was really 4 or 5 people at once discovering the different projects of Team Themis. But Romos coin was being used along with some other similar programs by some of these same actors in the Middle East from, let's say, 2006, it looks like, to probably 2014. And then those same companies and same individuals in some cases. This includes Archimedes Global, which shares executives with Cambridge Analytica. It includes Aaron Barr, who's the head of HP Gear on the Team Themis thing. These same elements, and Palantir, were all caught again in 2017 in the investigation, the Mueller Commission investigation, as having been involved in this big Cambridge Analytica Facebook election interference program in the 2016 election on behalf of Trump. They were all caught using this militarized counterinsurgency program. Remember, that's what Romos coin stands for, according to random Twitter guy number 5,000, whatever, on the U.S. public. The same kind of thing. It's a disinformation program. Romos coin was really large scale. It involved phone. I mean, people should look it up. You'll eventually find my Guardian article and the Project PM. In fact, if you go to Project PM Twitter, if you look at the pinned tweet, there's a link to our wiki, our old wiki that I went to prison over. It has articles on all these things. That's actually a good place to go and get the kind of get the you can't know the game without the scorecards, whatever it was, program. That nonetheless has failed to matter. The fact that these same individuals, led by Peter Thiel, that were caught in this one major scandal in 2011, went on to use this other militarized program that was used against the Middle East to do disinformation and so forth, and crowd predicting and other things we're not even sure about. It was used on the U.S. public, and the FBI started investigating, and then we're like, oops, these are the same people we protected. This involves Stratford, that company that Mueller is bragged about in a speech you can see on FBI.gov. He bragged about overseeing that Stratford operation where 6 hackers, which includes me somehow, even though I'm not a hacker, were arrested. Mueller brags about that. So this is this company, Stratford, that was meeting with General Flynn in 2010 for unknown reasons. We're meeting with the Archimedes Global CEO, former CIA guy, barely gave him the time of day. That's how high up Stratford is. All these other companies that were caught in this thing. FBI looked into it, the Mueller Commission, which the remit of the Mueller Commission was not just to look into Russia. It was to look into any interference. They leaked in 2017 to the Washington Post. That's why you can look up. They leaked this investigation, these companies, White Canvas Group, half led by General Flynn, Flynn Intel Group, obviously led by General Flynn, Archimedes Global, Palantir. We're investigating these, and then you never hear anything about them again because someone at the FBI realized, oh, fuck, this is not something we need to go into. We have our hands all over this. And so that's the story of the 2016 election. Yes, Russia was also involved. Russia's involved in everything. That's why they have spies. They're very good at it. But the real crime of the last 10 years was the manner in which the establishment, whether it be the FBI, New York Times, Peter Thiel, who's somehow the answer to the establishment now, not only allowed this to happen, not only allowed this election interference thing, and say what you will about democracy. I'm an anarchist myself, but like if we're gonna have it, let's have it. Let's not have it like be a even worse form of aristocracy where we don't know it's an aristocracy. Let's have a real informed consent, democracy with rule of law and everything, or let's try. Anyway, so that's what happened. That's really the bigger story here. That's what makes all these other little stories important to me and these other individuals, because we've seen what they've have done. We also know, being careful people, that we've missed something. We definitely don't know everything they've done. We're not that good. So no one can be trusted. And that includes me, because I've fallen for these people. I've been co-opted as people. That's the other big element of this. So that's why it's so important that every time we do, by the grace of Almighty Zeus, we come across documents that are smoking guns and that the establishment admits they exist and that they're real, and thus they become real to the public. On those occasions, we have to pursue these people to the very end, because every advantage is theirs. We've seen the extent of what they will do, and now, as of this week, the head of this whole ongoing network of intelligence operatives and corporations and ex-military intelligence people and my former comrades in some cases they're holding rallies for Peter Thiel to now to capture, having captured everything else, to capture the revolutionary youth, which means God knows what. And that's why I hope to someday rip out Eric Weinstein's heart, his beating heart, and eat it. And you can, and Peter Thiel obviously will have to. I mean, look, this is serious. It's a shame that we don't live in the 30s, because I mean, even that was like pulling teeth. Getting people to acknowledge maybe the fascists are bad. You had Arthur Koestler and running across Europe, being chased and then arrested by the French, and then being arrested by the English, and then now we're at war with the Nazis. It's that kind of thing. There's too many people, just like there was in the 30s, too many people who have something to gain from the Nazi takeover. There's too many people like Winston Churchill who praised Mussolini back then, years before going after him. It's the same kind of situation, except worse. Because we don't have Arthur Koestler, we don't have George Orwell. I know someone objected to my praising George Orwell based on his former imperial police in Burma. He's also someone who recognized that fact and broke away from it and tried to redeem himself. Just as I come from that even worse background. Anyway, so what I'm saying is we have everything we need to know. I mean, everything's documented. And hopefully the next year, this case, this larger thesis, and the details that whoever needs what will be sufficient to bring other people on board on what's actually going on. After that, at some point, we're going to have to get less comfortable as individuals in what we have and start thinking in the self-sacrificial terms that people used to think in back in what I consider the good old days, back when people gave a shit, whether they were right or wrong. They stepped in and put their balls on the line. That's what I want to see. That's the real cultural revolution among the revolutionary youth that has to happen. What form that takes, I don't know. Nor would I say it out loud if I did have a good idea of that. But it has to take some form. The alternative is more of this. And there is no one that will help you. Not the Democratic Party, which I'm sure you all find shocking. Not the Republican Party, not the Libertarian Party, not Peter Thiel and his revolutionary youth, not Ron Paul, not the risen ghost of Karl Marx. No one.
But you know who will save us, Barrett? And I'm glad you mentioned Eric Holder, because I just saw him being portrayed by our new leader in a series about the founding of Uber. And that's Hill Harper. Hill Harper is going to save us.
Doesn't look like him at all. I haven't seen it. I don't remember.
Hill Harper. No, Hill Harper is.
He's a great actor,
but it was perfect. Well, it was I don't. Well, whatever about his acting, but he's a bad political actor. I think that is on the scene. Hill Harper, as he tries to move into Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff, and he's just an actor. He's a friend of Obama. Went to Harvard with him, and now he's an actor. He plays a lot of roles I don't like, and including a positive portrayal of Eric Holder in this Uber series. So that was just, I couldn't help. That was just yeah. But it doesn't matter, Shirley, because he decided
not to run for president after he was claiming, he was like, you remember 2017, he was talking about running. He has a lot. I mean, I don't even know this Uber stuff, but
well, he had apparently, according to the series, and I didn't know much about this. Apparently, at one point, Holder was brought in in his associates to do a dig into Uber's behavior and give them solutions on how they could improve their image and save the company and anyway. And it was just the reason Hill Harper he doesn't have to look like Holder. He has to be, he just is there. I think it's to assure Hill Harper resonates in pop culture.
Oh yeah, sure.
So that he can come back and sell us Bitcoin as a solution to black.
With Peter Thiel and the neo-Nazi partners, that'd be great.
But listen,
culmination. That'll be in the end of the race wars right there. When
that's
we have
it. But
Eric Holder and Peter Thiel, the German, coming together to sell fascism, that will be, it'll be over.
But the connection that the connection I didn't want to make here, though, is that because to the segue I wanted that to play for us is that part of why you wanted to come on this morning is in addition to what you've been talking about, is that there's some specifics that as it relates to Black political struggle that you are, I guess well, you could explain it yourself, but
Yep.
you wanted to give a little bit of a warning about infiltration and surveillance of Black political movements today. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
And now with that 45-minute preamble, I'm ready to do that in a way where it'll be understood. So, bearing all that in mind, here are some of the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. Number one, and then their relation to the Black political struggle and how it will be abandoned, already is being abandoned, disregarded by the new class of white leftists who have become in ascendancy in the last 6-7 years. The Intercept, which I used to write for, which was set up, as we now know, I mean, we always knew by Pierre Omidyar, the guy who before he funded it with $500 million, was on record as saying whistleblowers should go to prison, they're traitors, and then changed his mind. We also now know was working with Peter Thiel on the Intercept. Again, this is the outlet that's supposed to be the whistleblower outlet. It took the Snowden emails that Glenn Greenwald, my former comrade and now enemy, and Laura Poitras, my still comrade, who left this whole burning dumpster fire a couple of years ago and leaked a bunch of documents. They had those Snowden emails, and Pierre Omidyar approached them along with Peter Thiel and Weave, apparently, the neo-Nazi, approached Greenwald. Laura Poitras didn't know about this, and set it up. Anyway, the guy who's been working with the Intercept and who oversaw the Snowden files, Micah Lee. This is a guy I've known for years to some extent. Didn't think much of him. Just thought he was a sap, yuppie. He was actively attacking myself and some of my other associates publicly about 2 weeks ago about this conspiracy theory about Anonymous being infiltrated, as if this hasn't already happened before, like, and written about in the Intercept. Blah, blah. He hadn't seen any evidence. Anyway, come to find out, because I approached him, because again, I won a National Magazine Award for this outlet that he works at. Michael Lee is the director of InfoSec, Information Security for the Intercept, which is a fun role because even by their own what they're willing to admit, there were a lot of errors that led to Reality Winner, being exposed when she sent her document to the Intercept. And the Intercept, it's 5 reporters, including the guy who would become the NYPD spokesperson, somehow mishandled those documents. Anyway. So that's Michael Lee. Anyway, he comes publicly attacks everybody about this. He's one of the people who have, for some reason that I can't quite grasp, is now more credible than, say, me or Reality Winner or the other people that, when we were useful to them, were heralded as these truth tellers, blah, blah. I caught him in a couple of lies, and I made those lies public about Emma Best and Distributed Denial of Secrets, the group that is at the center of this ongoing anonymous CIA intersection. It's a group run that's been caught working with some of these same people: Weave, the neo-Nazi; Aubrey Cottle, the Holocaust joking, N-word using admitted CIS FBI cooperator that was held as head of Anonymous. They've been caught, blah, blah. We now have documents showing not just that Emma Best has a past in the intelligence community, which is something that everyone used to know. Emma Best is the founder of the US. Documents also showing that they changed their name back in 2000. It looks like 2013. This is after I had first worked with this person right before I went to prison. Changed their name from one male name to another. And this is a legal court document, filing in Pennsylvania that we made public. Actually, we didn't make it public. It was actually made public a few weeks ago and posted. But then we brought people's attention. And the name change was done by their own admission in this document because of their ongoing work with the intelligence community. It was from one male name to another, from some really white ass name with like 4 Peter something to another male name, Michael Best. This document is the key smoking gun that Michael Lee and others have been trying to get me to make public for a long time, to supposedly prove, as if it's not already proven by the other documents I have, like their admission to working for Wikistrat, to prove that Emma Best, who's the centerpiece of all of this in terms of the takeover of by the intelligence community, to prove that they have an intelligence community background. Michael Lee was telling me, that would be a huge thing if it turned out that Emma Best, the head of all this, had an intelligence community background. And I posted those DMs as well. So then I gave him the document showing that exact thing.
Can I
And
just, Barrett, just forgive
please
the
do.
interruption. One, I
Please
want to
do.
give you a chance because we got a number of folks in the chat who are concerned about you and think you might need to get a drink of water. So if you want to
Oh
get
yeah,
something
well, I
to
kind of
drink,
do. Yeah,
man.
let me grab this.
And I'll take the moment while you do that because you did share with me that document where the petitioner Daniel Matt Curdy Burnett
Yes.
requests the court waive the requirement of publication for good. And the point that you're making is that, so I just want to be clear because I need to be clear. I want to make sure people watching and listening are clear. Emma Best is a pseudonym for a male hacker activist figure in all of this
Yes.
who wants to change their name from one male name to another that is being popularly discussed as part of a transition in terms of a transgender transition.
Well, at that
And
point,
why
so to keep it clear, so at that there was no mention in this document. There's no mention whatsoever of transgenderism. In fact, I mean,
right. That's what I just. But
right.
But the public.
Now here's the point. So when I published this document, after I gave it to him privately, it's been circulating privately. It's been published before. DDUS has seen that document before. Had no issue with it being, didn't say anything. When I published it, Michael Lee, rather than saying, "Oh, here's this tremendous evidence of this thing I've been calling a conspiracy theory," he had stopped replying to it. Stopped replying to me when I sent to him privately. And then when I publicly posted it, he and another lawyer, associate DDUS, called me out for dead naming the person. Now, as I pointed out, and there's a reason this didn't get very far. There's a reason that literally 3 people who were known people made this accusation. Number one, it had been posted before, and DDUS had not called you dead naming. Number two, I wasn't dead naming anyone, or rather, I don't know which one is a dead name, because this is a male to male name change being done in service to ongoing intelligence work on behalf of someone who's receiving whistleblower documents.
That's what I wanted to read. I just wanted to read in the document you sent, which appears to be, perfectly legit. I don't know if you could even see it. It looks like a legit court document.
Yeah, they've acknowledged it's veracity.
The petitioner is currently actively pursuing a course of study in national security and counterintelligence work, intends to be employed full-time in the field of national security counterintelligence, is known among professionals in that field by the name he is seeking to make his legal name, and has published and writes on national security topics under that name. So that's the reason one for the petition to change the name.
Yep.
The second reason is that the petitioner is concerned about possible harassment from extremist activists against his family and relatives as a result of his work in national security counterintelligence, if a connection can be found through Google between his family birth name and his professional name.
Which is a fair point, because that's exactly what's happening now. Extremists like myself are now after this person.
But there's nothing and just quickly, there's nothing in the 2 remaining points that has any reference to something about gender or transitioning or anything. It's strictly about trying to protect himself from being called out for intelligence work. So
anyway, because they'd already infiltrated Anon from 2011 2012. I worked with this person back then on some projects, and was going to gradually over the years to come, along with several other people who also have interesting backgrounds, was going to gradually take over control of all this stuff, which they now have. And so it's very important. That was a very key document. Anyway, so I pointed out, and a few people, those people, Micah Lee, who had been claiming such a document could not exist, and I posted the entire DM conversation, still have that, make that public, said, "Don't dead name trans people, Barrett." Now, I've never been accused of any kind of anti-transgender. I mean, I've worked with transgender people for, in prison as well. But one of the prisons I was at before I got kicked out into a medium was a medical prison. So it was at a higher normal ratio of transgender inmates. This is the Fort Worth Medical Center. So, I mean, I then got out in 2016, 2017, obviously worked with Emma Best, thinking this person was trans, had advocated for Chelsea, who is trans. So on and so forth. And now, but anyway, but because other people had this document, other people had been reluctant to post it, because this group of counterintelligence, of documented counterintelligence operatives who work with people who are even nastier than them, like the ones I described, like Weave, the neo-Nazi, They're very, very good at making things not matter and jumping to some other issue. In this case, the way they protected themselves was predicated on knowing the nature of the modern white left, of the sort that, here in London, you figure out to fucking deal with, of the sort that, run, the college left campuses. The people who have done very little have achieved, I don't think, very much in the last 7 or 8 years because of their inability to get off the gas, as it were. They knew that the white left will stop any conversation whatsoever, even including those they weren't paying attention to previously. If someone brings up the word dead naming, doesn't matter if it actually happened, doesn't matter all the other, just like with everything else this day and age, details don't matter. And I pointed out in response to this that, look, well, number one, a bunch of people who were part of the LGBTQ activist thing for going 20 years, to my defense, of course. One white anarchist who I don't think is who's not in on this. He's actually a very thoughtful anarchist, thoughtful guy, William Gillis, one of the guys who was defending me last year when I was accused of being a cop here in the UK and then arrested and put in the deal. He was also, he was conned by this successfully. And so what I'm saying is, number one, what Black activists need to know, if they don't know it already, obviously I'm not like white Moses coming down with my 10 tablets of look out blacks, here are the things that white people do. But here is a tip from a well-known white. The way in which like an element of the left, particularly the white, the degree to which they have not bothered to think these things through, all in the pursuit of their well-intentioned and justified advocacy for transgender and so forth, it has been weaponized, is being weaponized, and was weaponized last week in a way that does detract from my ability or the ability of you or anyone's ability to point to active harm to the Black community being done by these same people. As in Emma Best, as they call themselves. Number one, I have reason to believe, and now have further documents showing is not trans at all. Number two, we have documents now, and by we, I mean some other people I work with, showing that their second in command, who I won't name here, is also not actually trans. Number three, we have documents showing that their former editor-in-chief who works there, Lorax Horn, who has been especially vicious in defense of Kurtaner, Neil Rauhauser, other neo-Nazis who helped run Daily Stormer, also is not actually trans. These are people who all have running from confirmed, documented, court-confirmed counterintelligence backgrounds to very highly suspected counterintelligence backgrounds, and who all have been very reticent, unlike actual trans people, about going into details of their transgenderism, and have been caught lying about these issues as well. Now, this is something I'm only coming on this show to talk about, because if I go on Twitter, oh, for God's sakes, I'll go on Twitter and say this person's not actually trans, and this person's not actually trans, and this person's not actually trans, and they've been caught lying about it. Here's the evidence. Here's what they're doing. Here's why it matters. There's an extent to which that's not useful. But it occurred to me that there are lots of things that the white left and the white community in general, don't care about, like Peter Thiel, that perhaps the Black activist community might understand better, might understand the need for nuance on some issues, and for lack of nuance when it comes to the moral underpinnings of what these people are doing with neo-Nazis at a time when we have a real Nazi threat that would have been unimaginable 20 years ago. So here I am.
Look, I mean, that's one of the several reasons why I've wanted to going back some time now, interview you and learn more about your work is that I do think there is an insufficient focus in Black political spaces on these issues, particularly pertaining to the details of internet or digital surveillance, infiltration, and then specifically even right now, even in some what I would have previously thought of as more radical circles, this issue of, and I know this isn't your point, but the issue for me of the connection between Peter Thiel and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is the false adoption in some circles of that as revolutionary space or potential, or as having revolutionary potential. So to see even more, and I haven't even gotten into this most recent Bitcoin conference at which Thiel made these comments, or Weinstein was, praising him and all this other stuff. Like, but those are the connections that I have wanted to bring more into discussion in Black political spaces that I don't see. So that, because, so that the other part, of course, is that I do pay attention to what purports to be the white left or alternative press for information, et cetera, and so forth, and have noticed quite, again, from my perspective, suspiciously, an absence of discussion of you and the work that you and your colleagues have been involved in and associated with. I don't hear a lot of discussion of any of that in these spaces, aside from the more recent popular call for free Assange, which itself I don't see going into very deep explorative space after the slogan. So anyway,
there's reasons for that, Yeah.
Well, I think that, I'm sure you have. I mean, I definitely have reasons for it.
Some of it's my fault, though. Some of it's just me and like my
really?
strategy, and some of it's my fault. But some of it is. I mean, it takes a toll on you to have 6 Twitter accounts banned over since you get out of prison. It takes a toll to have these information campaigns. It takes a toll to have to be the one to say this guy. Look, we found this guy, been this guy for 10 years. He's a Fed, though. We have to get rid of him. I don't care if he's your friend. All these things take a toll, lower your influence. So if you look back 3 or 4 years, you'll still see a lot of discussion of me and the things that we're putting out, in these spaces. But over the last years, it just, I've for a long period, I just sort of dropped out, just gave up. And also, I am a drug addict. I am erratic, and I am distracted by video games pretty easily. I'm a lazy person, quite frankly. But beyond that, yes, there has been, as I've been more successful along with my crew in digging up these things and becoming a threat yet again to some of these interests. Obviously, they fought back. They've done very well. Congratulations to all them. But
well, look, I appreciate the self-criticism, but your shortcomings are not an excuse for their bad politics. That's all that I would say. So in the same case, nobody's individual failings are the to be blamed for the shortcomings of,
and that's one of the big things about Julian Assange, is that Julian Assange, that's one of the other issues, is that this is one of those things where nuance was absolutely necessary, both to protect our movement, to protect Assange from himself, and to protect him from infiltrators. That's one of the things that I've been big on for 10 years, and I've grown more serious about as I've matured and seen more things. At no point must we ever allow the criticism to have the enemy have the monopoly on criticism of our movement. We have to be doing that ourselves, and we have to do it in a way, and we can't do it in a way where just because the enemy is putting out this information, that means we disregard every attack on us is disinformation. Some of them are reasonable attacks. Some of them are internal. Some of them, whatever. That's the big unfortunate thing about the Assange situation, is that he absolutely does need to be kept out of the hands of the DOJ. This is not even about Assange. I mean, as for his well-being, things are pretty much over for him. But he was pursued and hit with a vast apparatus that, by design and by effect, damaged him, and made him and led him into worse things. And that's been the case for a lot of us. A lot of us have been approached by the same individuals. Cassandra Fairbanks is one of them who tried to infiltrate my legal defense community back when I was in prison. Successfully did so for a while. Then hung out with Chelsea Manning when Chelsea Manning got out of prison. And in the course of that, brought in other people. And this is who are also now involved in these things. This is someone who's basically a neo-Nazi, Cassandra Fairbanks, who celebrated I won't go into it, but went into it, did a number of things that, any single one of those things should be enough to be like, oh, this person is probably not a friend to the non-whites of the world. I'll put it that way. This is just one example of the kind of infiltrators who have come in to confuse us, or to later on, if need be, to discredit us among other left. It's a real complicated tapestry, obviously, but it is important that we have that all of us, anyone who is serious about the future or even about the present, Be very mindful of these things, and be, I would say, purify your heart and be ready to be wrong. Be ready to acknowledge being wrong and be ready for others to be wrong. Doesn't matter if they're the greatest hero in the world. Doesn't matter if Assange was the risen Jesus and Muhammad Mahdi at the same time. If we let the criticisms of Assange be monopolized by people who are not honest, people who are not making criticism honestly, they will be co-opted and adopted. And the things that Assange needs to be corrected on by us, by the rest of us, and by him, including people who were very close to him, have now left and fled for a number of reasons, out of confusion and worse. It means that we can't self-correct. It means that we become something that is far less than what we could have been. That this movement Assange started, that he founded and led, and that's a lot to ask for one person, especially if they're a hacker. If they're that's a lot of roles to have to play very perfectly, and obviously he could not do that. And I would say in some cases he's less than perfect. I've never met him personally. My fiance here has several times. Lori Love, my associate, I've dealt with him from afar on a couple of things, sometimes very publicly, sometimes negatively. Considered him my hero, along with Glenn Greenwald back 10 years ago. Was more than happy to go to prison on their behalf. Was proud when they published the documents, the 2 document sets that I was associated with. We have to just look to just basic elements of revolutionary history and just see how easy it is for us to become not just infiltrated, but the enemy ourselves, to become part of the problem, us to be co-opted. It's happened too many times for us to refrain from doing it right this time. And that's why I've been so critical of everyone on our side, as me, but not everyone, but and it's also why it's also one of the reasons why I've lost a degree of voice and influence over the years, because for better or worse, people don't necessarily like that.
Wow. Yeah. I again, not to keep bringing it back to talk about self-criticism to that series on Uber, but there was an interesting part in the last episode where they were talking about
it's on Netflix. What is this, Susan?
It's on Hulu. And it's about the original founder and CEO of Uber and the rise. It's very well done. It's I don't know how accurate it is and all of that, but it's very well done. So when you talk about, again, a self-critical look at how I waste a lot of my own time, but in this one scene, they were talking about why I only remember his initials, TK. I can't remember his whole name, but the original founder of Uber. The reason they were saying that the board had decided to get rid of him. At one point, they said that something to the effect that revolutionary leaders often are incapable of handling the new world they helped create. And that was one of the reasons why they needed to get rid of this guy, despite him being so important to the rise of Uber. He was now going to destroy what he had helped create by being corrupted by so many of the invitations to being corrupted. So I thought that. So listen, as we start to sort of have to wrap up here this morning, there are a couple points or comments or questions, if you don't mind, I'd like to. I've been saving from the chat. This one asks you to talk about Free Marty, #Free Marty G. I don't know anything about this.
Marty Gottesfeld. He was an anonymous hacker. He was hit by the feds. In fact, the same prosecutor as Aaron Schwartz. His trial was insanity. This is a guy who the hospital this is Boston Children's Hospital, was holding a young girl against the wishes of her family, claiming that she didn't actually have this very painful disease that she had, and that they were just, and would not release her. Finally, the family came and smuggled her out to go to a different hospital, where they immediately identified her as having this actual disease. In the meantime, she was essentially living in a state of torture. Marty Gottesfeld had gotten wind of this, and as an unknown anonymous hacker, he went to the website of the Children's Hospital and replaced the mainstream with the thing free. I can't remember the girl's name. Had no effect on hospital operations, but you wouldn't know that from the press coverage. Some of the press coverage. Actually, there's a very good Rolling Stone article on him that actually goes into this very well, but you wouldn't know it from the DOJ's claims and so forth. He has been in what the BOP, Bureau of Prisons, calls a communication management unit for several years now. that's just, I mean, I wouldn't have, you can give me 3 hours and I couldn't go into every single bizarre affront the BOP. And, I've dealt with the BOP quite publicly, both in and out of prison, was rearrested by the BOP for giving interviews. It's an organization that should have been wiped out years ago. I mean, there's just nothing. This is something that not even Republicans defend the BOP anymore. The Economist magazine, I mean, everyone knows what it is. It's the greatest. Anyway, she's in the communication management unit, which is where they put a lot of the environmentalist terrorists, where they put a lot of the Muslims, regardless, because they're Muslims. And it is this word dystopian is thrown around a lot. It's terrible. Anyway, so and I've seen that there's been a number of issues where he's sued. He successfully sued the prison officials and all that. He's been thrown into the SHU for longer. I mean, I spent 6 months in the SHU altogether, mostly on unjustified offenses, occasionally because I had hooch or had morphine in my system during a random drug test. Fair play, whatever. But 4 months altogether for made-up investigations because I'd done some things that involved getting journalists information about the BOP. Oddly enough. Anyway. This guy's done a lot more. I mean, what he's been going through as he continues to do, what I try to do, what others do every day through basically doing life in prison, whatever, exposing BOP's malfeasance to a public that doesn't care, didn't even care back before COVID, back before our own big problems started showing up in the West. He suffered a lot for it. I don't know what's going on in his case now. I did see I got an email I haven't read yet about another filing. Unfortunately, as I've told his wife a number of times, we've moved past the point in which any of this is enough. If she's ready to pull you and I were talking about George Jackson the other day. We need to start thinking like it's the 70s again. That's what I'll say. None of the information campaigns. I mean, even the reporters that aren't corrupt or just incompetent or sociopaths, they can only do so much. Even the editors that understand these issues, they can only do so much. Even putting out these great articles that go into details, like happened with my case when I first started becoming popular in 2013. Partway through my imprisonment, when they even acknowledge the importance of these cases, what the impact is, it doesn't matter. I mean, again, we're trying to reach a public that it's not even a citizenry. So this goes to what I was saying earlier. When people are ready to start ratcheting up, start fighting the war that's been fought against us for years, start fighting back and stop apologizing for it, stop mincing around the terminology and start acknowledging what we're up against and start working to appeal to those who understand this on some level, on some issue, and try to broaden their horizons into other issues, show them what they've been wrong about, and get them mobilized. I mean, mobilized. Then we'll have Marty G free from prison. Until then, I'll be stuck here in the UK on asylum, doing asylum claim, and and you can imagine what's going to happen to everybody else. I mean, the things that me and him are going through, that's not about that. The things that we've gone through, others are about to go through. These are just examples. These are just symptoms. The disease is afflicted upon the world's people without a microphone, billions of people. Those are the real victims here, not me or Marty G. We're just the canaries in the coal mine or the messengers or whatever. So that's my answer. That's about free Marty G. He has to be.
Another question for you: how long were you in prison? Because that was the context that I was suggesting that if the more you look to engage Black politics and having been in prison, I was asking you if you had read George Jackson. You said you had been given Soledad Brother while you were locked up. I would also encourage you to definitely check out Blood in My Eyes.
Someone mailed it to me. I don't know who. And the funny thing about that is that Soledad Brother in the California state system, it's one of a number of books that if you have a copy of it, it's an automatic check mark for gang verification. So luckily it's not in the feds. We were thinking about that. Me and my fellow cellmates, we learned about this. We were discussing like, well, if I'm white, can I have a copy of it? Like, does that mean there are books in the California State Prison where if you're white, you can have all this Black revolutionary literature, but you can't verify me as being part of the Black royal family, or maybe me, because I've had to abandon my race. So I guess I'm the one guy. But still, anyway, So I read Soledad Brother. What's the name of that wonderful woman who tried to break him out of Soledad? Angela Jackson. No.
Angela Davis. Well, Davis. That was what she was accused of. That's a whole other.
Well, it was a good idea. Anyway, whoever had it to whatever extent. But anyway, so I was in prison for 4 years. I faced 105 years. I was sentenced 63 months. I got out 6 months early, which is some of the most for halfway house time. That's the most halfway house time you can get in the feds, and it has something to do with the fact that the prisons didn't want me there anymore. I was kicked out of 2 prisons because I was writing a column from prison. I was I was a difficult inmate to control. Was a gang leader for 3 months. That was my stint running a gang. That ended when there was a coup by the neo-Nazis to take back control of the thing, and then the prison staff helped. And I was kicked out of that prison the day after my first of 2 sentencing hearings. Lost all my documents in that move, oddly enough, and later thrown to a medium prison. Did 6 months of that time in the SHU, and then was rearrested in 2017 for giving interviews, put back in one of the same places I'd been for a few days, saw my old friends. Then the court judges were threatened to be brought in, and I was released without any paperwork. So I was arrested without a warrant and without any BOP paperwork, which is even a lot of, it's pretty good. I've got a lot of, what do you call achievements unlocked, in the gamer world that are very unusual, and that's one of them. And I've also spent a few days in an immigration facility here in the UK last year, for a couple of days after I first came on this show. It was a coincidence, luckily, but and a few days in the Metropolitan holding cell, and that's it. So, Metropolitan Police holding cell here in London. So yeah, just 4 years. But in the feds, 4 years is short term. Like you're in and out. The feds hand out. What is wrong with Glenn Greenwald? Boy,
I think you've answered this, but if you want to say anything else, I'm just.
Yeah, he's a liar. He's a sociopath. I say this as someone who was recruited by him personally to write for The Intercept, who won him a National Magazine Award. He's written articles praising my investigations. He was attacked. He was pursued by Peter Thiel and this whole Team Themis thing. These companies because of his advocacy for WikiLeaks. He shortly thereafter had, oddly enough, started refraining from mentioning this at all. We didn't know why until recently when we found some documents that had been passed around that show Greenwald, who's now working openly with Peter Thiel, that he had taken the money, as it were, by Pierre Omidyar. He's a yuppie of the worst kind. He was accused for years of working for the Russians, by a lot of the left-wing establishment, MSNBC. That's not what happened. He was working for something worse than the Russians. He was working for Peter Thiel and with a neo-Nazi that he's openly hung out with, associated with, Weave, Andrew Arnheimer. So if you look up my name in Glenn Greenwald, or look up why the Intercept really shut down the Snowden archive, you'll find some articles with some documents that Laura Poitras has leaked. I've leaked. Laura Poitras is co-founder of the Intercept, who left after realizing what was going on. He is a guy. He's a great example of someone who, because he's being attacked by MSNBC and the CIA and so forth, there's a tendency to be like, oh, he's on our side because we don't like MSNBC and the CIA. This is what I'm talking about. The enemy of my enemy is probably my enemy as well. That's, just keep that in mind. Anything lower than that, anything simpler than that, anything whether for pragmatic reasons or because people want to just quickly try to determine who's who, does not work. And in fact, makes you part of the problem. It makes you a potential cog in a machine you don't understand. So that is the answer to anybody else who might ask that question. I've been asked for years. It's similar to Assange, except Assange didn't do the things, did not make the. Assange's sins are far, far lesser than Greenwald's and of a far different nature. And I say that as one of his biggest critics and former allies. Greenwald is worse. Didn't know that until about a year ago. So funny thing about that. Anyway, so that's the answer to that question.
Well, Barrett, listen, I appreciate you coming on. You're always welcome back. But let me give you anything that we didn't get to, or I forgot to ask, or didn't know to ask, or that you want to make sure you say before we wrap up for this go round.
Yeah, actually, I would like to ask a favor for anyone who wants to do it to me, because Twitter has suspended my Barrett B account for good. This is I have the world record for permanent Twitter suspensions. The first 5 were restored by Twitter after outcry. Again, over time, as I lose influence, that if someone could just do me a favor and just tell Eric Weinstein, I'm still going to eat his heart. Doesn't matter if they get it on Twitter, I'm still going to rip his heart out and eat it. That would be helpful. Or just, read up on our stuff. Go to Proj PM on Twitter and read our wiki, read about these firms, read about Peter Thiel. Learn who Peter Thiel is. Learn about it from hopefully not one of his people at the New York Times. or from Eric Weinstein or Revolutionary Youth. Learn about it from those of us who have gone up against it for years. And find out what he is. Determine for yourself if you want a German-born, self-proclaimed foe of democracy, of any kind of democracy whatsoever, who associates with neo-Nazis. Decide for yourself if you want this guy to continue to gain influence and co-opt your heroes like Glenn Greenwald. Decide for yourself if that sounds like a good idea. That's what I would simply ask everyone to do. And if not, hit me up, because I've always got ideas.
Right on. Barrett Brown, thanks a lot for joining us again. Look forward to the next one, and especially as I continue to read these memoirs. It's fascinating stuff. So thanks again, and take care.
That counts as my reparations. No one gets any more reparations. Now to escape.
All right, everybody. Look, I appreciate, shout out to Barrett and to all of you for coming through. Really appreciate, again, the vigorous chat. And please continue to do all of the things that must be done to, violently metaphor your support for this show. Smash the like button, pounce the join button, punish the membership button, destroy your share button, and violent metaphor your support for this show and channel. And we greatly appreciate it. We'll continue on. The full Remix Morning Show will be back tomorrow morning and all week, and I'll be back on Friday. Please check all the recently published stuff. blackpowermedia.org, get you some merch, and we'll keep it moving. Thanks again to everybody for coming through, and catch you next time. As always, I feel like I'm forgetting something. Hold on one quick second. Let me just check my notes here. I feel like I'm forgetting something. No, doesn't look like it. Well, catch it later anyway. Peace, because we know you're willing to fight for it, everybody. Catch you next time right here, as Fred Hampton would have said, that is. And catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Keep it locked in Black Power Media. Peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.